Welcome back to Big Brave Business. I'm your host, Sarah K. Heeter. Big Brave Business is a podcast where we challenge the status quo of traditional business practices. So if you're ready to challenge norms, rewrite the rules, and redefine what it means to lead with courage and integrity, then grab a notebook and let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. I'm so excited to be joined once again by my good friend, Joanna Horton McPherson. And if you missed her previous episode, it was just like a couple weeks ago. So definitely go back and look. It was episode 105, Capitalism, Anger, and Entrepreneurship as Public Service. But now Joanna's back because every conversation we have, we're basically like, this should be a podcast. This is what our friendship is like. So thank you for being here. Welcome back to the podcast, Joanna.
Thank you. I am so very happy to be here with you. And Sarah, you and I were trying to remember, if recalling the last podcast, which of our conversations were recorded for the podcast and which should have been recorded and weren't. We were just talking right now and we said we better record this. So
yes, there's a bunch of things that kind of came up as we were talking about should we talk about, and they all really come back to the heart of the same kind of theme of core values. But one thing you were just saying, and I want to just pick up there, we were talking about Big Brave Business and season 2 and the 4 pillars. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, first of all, thank you. But second of all, you may remember when I introduced season 2, I said I want to create content around these 4 pillars. And the 4 pillars are revolutionary leadership, diversity, ethics, inclusion, and accessibility, business ethics, and institutional interrogation. And as we were just chatting, you were saying, oh, I'm so intrigued by institutional interrogation. So
yeah,
tell me why that intrigues you.
Even if you said business ethics twice, it bears repeating, frankly. So I was just very interested in that being a pillar because it's not a popular conversation to be someone who turns toward institution to be critical of how they function. But what we know about organizations is they're only as good as they are relevant. And if they're not doing what they say they do, who among us are going to call attention to that and get the real data on the impacts of how their operations are affecting people? So I know about this, and I'm really passionate about this topic because I've played the role of whistleblower in an organization more than once and not on purpose. And I resonate with this topic about interrogation because one thing we know about leadership is when you're making change, it's usually not welcome, because for an organization to change what they're doing means something's happening that isn't in alignment, and it's someone's job, maybe, if anyone carries this ethic, to call attention to that. Mm-hmm. But what happens when you're in the day-to-day in a business, there's no time for that. That's not on the agenda.
Yeah.
Typically, to look at how our business practices being ethical. Are the people who we say have input and influence, do they actually have that? Are our policies reflecting our practices, and vice versa, our practices reflecting our policies? So I've found in multiple cases, and a recent one was the last few years ago, and I ended up leaving a board that I was due to be a president for due to financial issues and a lack of transparency in the board. Mm-hmm. Not a popular topic.
Yeah.
Members, especially the president, who was the one who had, let's say, a lot of influence and not a lot of people saying no. The first thing that happens is when you speak up and have an ethical bone and say, I came here to do work with the board, but actually the work that's on the table is deeper ethical issues that are like stuff that shouldn't be happening, that we could be sued for, that is easy to overlook because it's just business as usual. Like this up with this, we will not put, we have to do something. The first thing that happens is people look at you like you are the problem. Who are you to be saying this? No one asked for this. So yeah. I think about this, Sarah, because it takes something inside of us as leaders to stand up and be willing to be that unpopular voice in the first pass. Because if you don't stand for that moment and you stay standing, you don't make progress and nothing else can change from there. But you've got to at least be able to do that first. And I want to hear what you have to say at that point.
I think there's a couple layers to this that are coming up for me. One is thinking about when you said you've been a whistleblower, and I think I really haven't. There have been times that I have started to speak up a little bit, and then honestly, if it's something where there's resistance to a core values alignment, I remove myself from the situation rather than trying to be the force for change in that capacity, in a business ethics capacity. So when it comes to like truly ethics, I find myself, that's when would find myself job hopping when I had like a 9 to 5. What's interesting about the business ethics specifically aspect of this is when I talk to people I just came back from a conference and so I met a lot of people and I would talk about, and it was a podcasting conference. So I would talk about both like Podfox, but also my podcast, this podcast. And when I start to describe what the, purpose and goals of this podcast are and what kind of conversations we have, everybody has a story about
Mhm.
if they worked a 9 to 5, if they worked a quote unquote corporate job, then every single person has their own story of coming up against an ethical dilemma at work. And that is, I think, inherently why I think Big Brave Business is so important, because I think we do need to be talking about this and how we can do it better and how we can do it differently. But then the other side of this that is kind of coming up for me is the difference between when you have a 9 to 5 versus as an entrepreneur and you just make stuff up, you just decide. And then there's like legal requirements that you have to do. But other than that, you can literally do things however you want, whenever you want, in whatever way you want. And that is an interesting difference because then you do get to really construct it from a core values perspective, from an ethics perspective, but you also don't know how to do it. Somebody still has to teach you. So then you have to find people to teach you business who align with your values. It's just a different, like a horse of a different color.
I agree with that. I was thinking about when you said you started to speak up. And what I should say is, from my perspective, I know a lot about what I should have spoken up in a lot more instances when I didn't than when I did, just to be fair, because we learn by mistakes we make a lot of times. So I can think several times when there's something that was going on and I knew something wasn't right, but I wasn't at that time and earlier in my career. Here's the story I was telling myself. I'm not far up enough the chain to say anything because here's
Yeah.
the other part of the story. Maybe I don't have all the information. But I look at that now as not really trusting in myself as a
Yeah.
leader and not backing the instincts that truly guide us. Like people don't really like to talk about the role of intuition and instinct in business, but I think it is a very undervalued skill that when you have a sense about a situation, opportunity, a person, that goes a very long way. And it also goes the other way when you sense something's off here. If you're wanting to look the other way and overlook it, that's a bad habit. That's a bad habit. And I know a lot about that. And it ended up becoming something I learned from a lot of wanting things to brush under the rug because I want business as usual. I don't want a complicated work life. But
Yeah.
some of us, when we come with such, I want to be in alignment. And I think the entrepreneurial community really resonates that being in alignment with what you care about is why we do what we do.
Yeah.
And if you find yourself in an organization where you seek alignment, when the contrast comes up and the inverse is there and there's something that shouldn't be happening going on, you're going to be the one to sense it first.
Yeah.
Then this takes me into also, we were talking about speaking and being on stage and grow. You talked about the valuation of a business and growing a business and growing an asset and how these conversations connect. I'm so grateful for you, Sarah, that you talk about this on your podcast and your business, because what we know about someone like you and you specifically do is you're influencing this conversation for people to talk about how they're showing up in their business with
Yeah.
their ethics and more importantly, when we're not.
Yeah.
so we can learn how to do that, and being a voice for better business practices, being willing to lead in the unpopular bad news that there's some shift that needs to happen in the organization, usually around leadership. No one wants to be the one delivering that message, but this is how businesses fall apart. This is how businesses fail. This is how people have frustrated dreams, is when we don't speak up and we don't pay attention to the data and we don't rise to our own leadership level within ourselves
Yeah.
to do the right thing.
It's interesting because I just keep on reflecting about a particular 9 to 5 experience that I had that I did not. I expressed that I was uncomfortable with something, and I was supposed to be the person who was responsible for signing something and didn't declined. No, I will not sign this. So I did stand up for myself in that way. It was met with a lot of exasperation, and you're creating a bottleneck unnecessarily, kind of frustration, but they moved forward how they were going to move forward. And it's interesting because you were expressing like, oh, I didn't necessarily see myself as enough of a leader, or like the reality is the power dynamic is what the power dynamic is. And I could be a leader in my own life and in my own actions, but I wasn't a leader in that conversation. Like there was leadership in that conversation, and like formally so. And yes, I could have more ambiguous leadership by speaking up, but like I made at the time sub $50,000 a year and had to make ends meet, right? Like I had to keep a roof over my head. So the power dynamic is very real. And I think so what's coming to mind is Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos, and they made that mini series, The Dropout, on Hulu, and I thought it was so well done. I was completely addicted, and of course, I was like aware of the Theranos scandal, but I really didn't follow it like when it was happening. So after I watched this mini series, I went down this rabbit hole of watching stuff, reading stuff, like really. I mean, I know I was not alone. Like that mini series was very popular, but what's interesting to me about it is that the people who did blow the whistle, and I think that this is really common, were not in leadership. It isn't usually. It's people who are kind of the peons of the organization, right? The interns, or it is the people on the other side of the power dynamic. And what's interesting is there is a story that we could tell ourselves, and this is a very popular kind of thing in conversation in business, that in order to become a leader in business, you have to be willing to accept a certain level of unethical business practices. And then it doesn't just stop at business. It carries over into all kinds of aspects of being a human, and where your core values and your business ethics lie. And I was very determined. God, I can even think back to my first quote unquote corporate job after college. I was in sales. I worked for Verizon. I was selling cell phones. And just going through their sales training, generally speaking, I actually had an overall good experience with the company. So I'm like not trying to say there was anything wrong with the company as a whole. I really can't say. I had such a limited experience for such a large company. But I did have a particular manager who really wanted to push me to be kind of the stereotype of a shark in sales, and I just couldn't. And at first I was determined to prove to her that I could have the success in sales without being quote unquote a shark. And then I ended up just leaving the company. And then I thought I hated sales for a really long time. I thought I hate sales. I'm not good at it. It's not for me. In order to be good at sales, you have to be XYZ, right? Like you have to be a shark. You have to be to a certain degree unethical, right? And that like myth about sales is so prevalent, which is why people are hesitant or skeptical when they think they're being sold to, which is all the time, by the way. Like literally constantly, we live in capitalism. You're being sold to walking down the street. But I think that kind of story, that you, in order to be successful in business, in order to be successful in sales, you have to sacrifice some of your values. That's something that I feel like entrepreneurship gives you the chance to totally rewrite.
Ooh, yeah, this is a good way to take this conversation.
Thank you.
I wanted to go back before we move on though to the peon power dynamic conversation, because I have a good friend who left the mental health community health field where it's in an institution and she's working with people in addiction and usually comorbid occurring like mental illness with addiction and type of things like that. And the prevalence of what's called moral injury in when you see that the practices are more about profit than about serving the clients.
Mm.
And so what the difference is when we're in someone else's structure in an organization, a non-entrepreneur, most of us with a 9 to 5 are serving the God of the company's core values. Ideally, it aligns with your human core values to help this person who's in addiction. But then when you see when a push comes to shove, I don't like that term, but when rubber meets the road, there is a misalignment with treating when it comes to if it's expensive, they're not going to do it. So what are you actually doing here? We're actually here to make money. Are we not actually here to help people? And so to speak to, my friend would tell me time and time again, her experiences of going to corporate with concerns about policies and things she was meant to day enact in her office with clients that I can't do this. I want to do this. And they would just be like, that's just the way it is. And so what it costs to absorb that misalignment of values ends up causing what people call burnout and stress. It's moral injury. It's the sense that your morals and your ethics cannot be lived out. And you're, in fact, it costs you something to stay serving this function that is against the highest good of a person. And what the individual cost is and the human who's meant to carry that out. And then when you said the change with the Theranos, all the whistleblowers happening it was the intern who spoke up. It wasn't the investor, it wasn't the people in the high up. What does that tell us about leadership, really? That change didn't come from the top.
Mm-hmm.
That change and leading with their core values can come from anywhere at any time. What does that tell us about leadership? Is that it took that intern the willingness to step out of ranks and speak up. And that is leadership. And it doesn't see the power dynamic there had nothing to do with their capacity to make change and cause this pyramid to fall. And so we have, on the one hand, leadership as power, and on the other hand, leadership as ethical, being a visionary, living someone with a voice, and I know which one I'd rather be in because those really make change. And we can see examples all the time of people in power who don't make change. They're more status quo.
I think that's so interesting for a couple of reasons, but one thing I do want to say, I want to call this out because I think somebody listening is thinking this, and so I want to say it too. I know which one I want to be too, but I also need to make money, and I crave making good money, not just because making money is quote unquote the American dream, right? But also because I want the financial security for myself and for my children. I want to not have to live paycheck to paycheck. I want to not be controlled and dictated by debt. Right? And so I do need to be able to make money and good money. And that is hard when it feels like those are the only two choices. You can be ethical or you can make money, and that's it. And that's part of the reason why, for me, entrepreneurship is the clear answer, because then I'm in control, and maybe I'd grow faster and maybe I would do something differently or whatever if I didn't have to be tied to my values. But I get to be tied to my values, and I get to make more money than I ever so far have made in my life. Not that it's like some crazy amount of money comparatively to the world, but I also want to say too, this is particularly interesting and I think an empowering direction to take this, to say you might feel like the power dynamic is imbalanced, but really you have so much more power in your leadership than, because we're recording this the week of the inauguration of Trump's second presidency. Many Americans and probably people worldwide, but especially Americans, obviously, are feeling disenfranchised, feeling like either their votes don't matter or their opinions don't matter or there's nothing they can do. And especially seeing the images coming up from the inauguration ceremonies with a bunch of billionaires in a row in the room together, and feeling like if you're not a billionaire, how can you possibly make a difference? And so I'm just curious, like we did talk on our previous episode a little bit about entrepreneurship as public service. And I think this kind of comes back around a little bit to that of so being a catalyst for change and being an agent of change and being willing to interrogate these institutions and believing that, let's say, like the person listening believes that they have more power, they just have to tap into it. What would you want to say to them right now?
I want to talk about that inside of making money in sales, actually, because I'm right there with you. That's where I've landed too, is it's really nice to say I want to make a change in the world, but that feels like a luxury, really, to a lot of people. And it doesn't feel accessible, like really nebulous also. And I think we just have a false setup of what's possible. We don't have a lot of training in this country of what it is to be someone who makes your own system as an entrepreneur. There are not a lot of accessible examples of this in public school. Like no one really helps you understand that it would be better to know how to think for yourself and invent things and work with people and learn how to talk across differences and solve problems instead of follow someone else's curriculum for what they think. I never use algebra. I could have spent those years of my life learning how to make a business. And in fact, my husband and I intend to raise our kids. We just bought a little toy cash register for them yesterday and got books from the library about money. But it's for one reason. It's not to enrich our own pockets. To make change, we have to help other people also know how to make their own system and make their own money. Because one thing we know about systems of oppression is it really relies on people giving their power up and participating and feeling impoverished and taken advantage of. And what we need to reinvent all of that is to give all of us in the collective wealth model, all of us the capacity to fulfill others' needs by making a business that will make money and be part of what society is asking for. And so when you talked about sales and Verizon and being a sales shark, and I never had an experience like that. But I can say from the consumer end, especially when I've had really great sales experiences, someone was truly solving a problem for me. And the more I talk to entrepreneurs, the more they're like, I really care about making money. And more than that, I care about serving. And if you line up your business with truly serving somebody, even if it's serving them tea, or
Mhm.
even if it's serving them, for me, knowing how to get on a stage and relax and open and be your next level self, or for you, holding your podcast to change the world and have your voice out there. Whatever need we're fulfilling, center on that and let's train to that. And you talked about enterprise and what people need to hear. This is what I want to say. What are you waiting for? It is a hurdle of financial, for those of us listening. It's if you need that nudge and that sign, can I start a business? Listen, the potential to make more money, Sarah, you just said it, is way higher when you're not in someone else's system. It just costs you the risk of self-belief.
Mm, risk of self-belief. I think I agree. I also think, I mean, it's a big ask to go from corporate to entrepreneurship. I think it feels like paralyzing risk. And I think that there are a lot of considerations about how long will it take for you to start getting paid? What's the healthcare situation? Because the United States, that's just going to get worse. But I think most people listening to this probably, if they are wanting to make that jump, probably have made it. But I do want to say too, I think even if what you're selling is more of a luxury or is more of a comfort and isn't so, in the episode that came out the week before this one, we just were talking about business as solving problems. And I think that that is a really good angle to go. And sometimes it also feels difficult. So Like, for example, my guest last week has a like blog and a podcast where she talks about motherhood and she shares recipes. And I think that there's kind of this something about that feels really hard for some people to say, well, how do I turn that into solving a problem or speaking to pain points? So I do think that there's something to be said for it. Same with, I work with a client who has a subscription box business. She does t-shirts and she does like a themed t-shirt each month. And that's certainly not like a problem. I mean, you could come up with pain points and problems that you're solving of you like the shirt, you like how it fits, you like these designs, and maybe you have trouble shopping for yourself or whatever it is, right? It could be, but mostly she calls it happy mail, right? And so mostly it's a pleasure thing more than a pain thing. All of that to say, where I really wanted to go with that is that we can see entrepreneurship, like what the actual services that we offer as the way that we're making change, but we can also see the way we're doing it as making change. So I don't think necessarily helping people with podcasts felt like a calling when I started my business. And that was something I kind of struggled with. Like, I want to do something more meaningful, like Big Brave Business, right? I'm going to do something more meaningful. But I've turned it into more mission based, obviously, because we talk about like the power of using your voice, and that podcasting is a great opportunity to build your own platform and use your voice because your voice matters. This is like a huge part of our branding, which is really going to feel more empowering and like problem solving. However, really at the heart of the way we do things at Podfox is that we do things differently. So I want to interrogate all the time, what is our sales process like? Someone came on a year ago now almost who talked about trauma-informed marketing and trauma-informed sales. And they really helped me see this whole concept. Stephanie Belinsky, by the way, if you want to go back and check that one out, Stephanie really helped me see this idea of consent throughout the sales process and how much that changes your experience in a sale if it's consensual. I was just sharing with you, someone tried to hard sell me on something this weekend that was very appealing to me. And when I decided I did not want to move forward, I was like afraid of how to tell them that I didn't want to move forward. And I was like, oh my gosh, are they going to still continue hounding me? Doesn't that sound just like what women are struggling with on dating apps? So if we
You're
can
so
kind of
right.
think of incorporating the same like kind of core values that show up for us, or that we want to show up for us, or that we strive to seek out in friendships and romantic relationships, if we can apply those same core values to the way we work with our teams, the way we work with our clients and customers, the way that we network, then it's going to be a whole new ball game. And that's interrogating institutions. That's kind of how I see that sort of all wrapping up together of, oh, here's what we're doing.
That you're talking about your friend's t-shirt business, and it is a big ask and a paralyzing risk for some people. But to your point, maybe a lot of these listeners have already been there, done that. But even a t-shirt sale has a why. I really believe this, Sarah, and I would love for you to challenge me on this, or somebody. There's a reason why someone chose the recipes and the talking about the mom. There's a deeper why at play. Whether we're tapped into it or not really is the question, because what we know about need fulfillment, it doesn't have to be the big needs in the letter N, big needs. It's just like feeling good and feeling connected. That smile, like you said, of getting happy mail. I'm just about to sign the biggest contract I've ever signed today. Okay.
Wow.
But from the I will be engaging with a book publisher, taking a huge risk on myself. So when I talk about self-belief as the biggest risk you'll ever take, I'm walking this talk right now. Okay. So something that I'm working on for this, it's a book that I'm writing, is that the most important work you will ever do on your business is the work you do on yourself. Because if we don't have a sense of what those core values are and the why you want to sell this t-shirt, it won't thrive. It comes from the sense of, if you imagine you're a gardener, we must know that the soil is ripe for what we want to plant, and we must know how to drive those roots down with purpose. And like, I care about this and I want to nurture it, and it's coming from a deep place of vision. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be your calling. Not everyone's going to have a business that's their calling. I don't know how the world would be if everyone did, but there is a why. And to know that you're centered on that and that you're the person uniquely who can deliver that is a very attractive quality to an audience. And with my clients, I work a lot on them preparing to be able to look people in the eye and be like, I'm that person. This is the work that I've done on myself. This is why I'm the one to deliver this message. It's an extremely compelling place to come from in yourself to know I've lined myself up with my core values. I've done that work and I've looked at what I no longer must do in order to serve that.
And I don't think that work is ever done. I think we keep interrogating that with what I have said about describing when I describe these 4 pillars is that it really comes down to in every decision that you make in your business. And so it's the big decisions like, what's my offer? Down to the small decisions of like, how am I going to choose to respond to this person in this particular moment where something's happening or they've said whatever? How do I respond in this moment? Or how do I approach this conversation? All of those like big and small decisions, every single decision being always coming back to, does this align with the mission? Does this align with the values? And that's permanent, that's long, that's forever work.
That is so, yes, it is. And it never stops. What you just said about how to approach people goes back to something for me about, I always take notes when we talk. When you start to speak up in a business, ethical dilemmas, okay? I think I know a lot about how to burn bridges. I've done that a lot. You're laughing. Yeah, I do. I think of a lot of people who have had like dysfunctional ways of dealing with conflict, know about that, know how to walk away, know how to like scorched earth, like I'm done, I'm moving on, move to the next job, whatever it is. What you just said about this, the big and the small ways that how to approach a conversation gets to what our core values of serving people. My background's in education primarily. And I think a lot about a conversation, how to have a difficult conversation, just that one skill can change a business, especially on the internal side, because team members, and I've had to have a difficult conversation in my own team recently that resulted in this person understanding that they weren't able to take on the job that they'd taken on. And it was not an easy conversation to have because you want to give people a ladder and not judge them or make them feel small in any way. But difficult conversations must be had on a regular basis if you're going to be effective and live into your core values. But like you said, we've got to get really good at that because those conversations you're never going to have your last difficult conversation.
That's true. And
then you're sent
honestly,
and done.
those conversations are a lot less difficult. They're still difficult. That's a difficult one, but they're still difficult, but they're a lot less difficult if you just approach them palms up with your core, leading with your core values. When you know what those core values are and you're leading with that, it makes all of those difficult conversations a lot easier. And I find that I'm a person who a lot of times people in my life will come to me with whatever situation and I'm really good at scripting back to them. Here's what you say. So someone comes to me and they say, I'm struggling with this. Most of the time it's friends who are still in a 9-to-5 situation, but sometimes this happens with entrepreneurial friends too. They come to me and they say, this is the situation I'm in. Here's what happened. Here's how I'm feeling about it. This is what I'm struggling with, blah, blah, blah. And I have this ability to kind of take the heart of what it is that they actually want to say and just reframing it back to them to like, here's what you say. Just say that, right? Like you say that, that's what you're struggling with. And it's hard, I think, when you're the one who's in the moment and you're feeling all the emotions running really high to be able to pick that script out. So having a person in your life, which, hi, I volunteer, having that person in your life who can kind of help you take the rage and the resentment and the fear and the whatever out of it and just say, lead with what you really mean. You and I had a conversation recently about NAWBO because we're both really involved in NAWBO. You're getting ready to step into president of NAWBO Phoenix and planning out your board and what that year is going to look like. And we've been talking about what role do I want to have in that and what do you see for me? And yeah, instead of being like afraid in that conversation, I just led with, hey, Here's how I'm feeling. Here's what I want. Here are the things that are coming up that are obstacles. And I'm just going to lead with transparency and like telling you honestly from again, leading with these are the values at hand. And then you do with that what you will.
Yeah, you did. You said, you stopped me partway and you're like, okay, wait. I just want to be clear. I am here for leadership.
Yes.
And I needed you to say that because I think I mentioned this to you in the course of talking with many people in the community on the board. I've been looking for someone to say that to me. What we know about this 50th year, going the 50th anniversary of NAWBO, is that there's a significance to that number.
Mm.
That many years of a group of women here simply to serve other women growing their businesses. And that originated with a few specific women who paved the way in history. Susan Hager is the one whose name is at the forefront for going to Washington specifically to change this bill to, for the first time ever, allow women to get her own line of credit and bank account in her own name without a man to open her business. That level of capacity and effectiveness, and with the other women who were lobbying alongside her, they turned to each other and they said, why don't we keep this going? Let's make an association and influence people. And here we are with all these chapters. And so that flagship moment of here we are, let's keep going, that moment matters to me. And I'm looking around, who are my people around me saying, here we are, let's keep going the next 50 years. So that level of being able to say what I saw you as you believed, given the right life circumstances, this is going to be something I want to take on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's exciting, first of all. Super exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I think so too. And I think those hard, quote unquote, hard conversations can become opportunities instead of just simply like, I just don't want to deal with this. Now, of course, there's always going to be stuff we just don't want to deal with. I'm like letting someone go or bring to someone's attention that they can't or they haven't fulfilled on something like that's it's never going to feel fun to do, but it is significantly less hard when you're approaching it from a standpoint of you're not coming from the place of I'm frustrated, I'm angry, I'm resentful, you're coming from a place of we have a common goal, this isn't working, right? And then whatever your values are, and I think that's something that you have to ask yourself too. What are your core values? Okay, I feel like I could just talk to you, but we already have been talking for a while, so I think I'd like to just kind of wrap up with that question, and then of course like always ending with what makes you happy. But before we get to the what makes you happy right now, I'd like to just kind of say, what are some of the values that you lead with in your business?
The first one comes to mind is integrity, which is doing what you say you do. For me, that's a great guiding star. Honesty and kindness. Kindness, a little bit of kindness can go a very long way in this world. And to be someone who's capable of being that. The Dalai Lama, there's a quote in my email: be kind whenever possible. It is always possible.
Mm-hmm.
That really, really gets me every time. So those are just the top three that come to mind right now. When I get down to business practices, I have more values and you could kaleidoscope in, but I wanted to ask you what yours are.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So easier for me to identify are the ones that we laid out for Podfox, which of course are aligned with me and they really match the podcast as well, which is we are better together, which is diversity, ethics, and inclusion, right? Being really mindful about that and the sense of community. We like good trouble. So pushing boundaries, embracing change, actively pursuing growth and evolution. I think that's really showed up for me personally as well, like constantly. And that's a big part of what I'm doing here, right? I'm not coming here to, I think this is why I haven't done a lot of solo episodes in season 2. The point isn't for me to kind of get on here and postulate what I think. It's to explore, like we're interrogating. That's what I'm doing, right? Like I really want to push myself and to grow from these conversations. And I think it makes me better. So that's there. We believe our voices matter. So that's another Podfox value. And we describe it as we empower, encourage, and support each other and enthusiastically add value to the community. So a value add, I think, is like a really big part of when I show up to any conversation. I want it to be a value add. And just using your example of having to tell somebody like either it's not a good fit at all or it's not a good fit for this role. I think this is a really good example of if you are living your life by, for example, of wanting to always add value, wanting to always empower, that is a core value of mine. Then when I approach a conversation like that, that is going to be the messaging, right? There's something empowering about this for both of us. And we approach the conversation that way, then it's going to be a totally different conversation. And then the last two, we get massive results. So we're strategic and define success through our impact. I like to be effective. I like to be efficient. I like to be a high achiever that shows up all the time. And then we have big fun. So life and business is better when it's joyful and exciting. And that's why I always end these podcast episodes with what's making you happy right now. I've said this before, but I think my 30s, one of the biggest lessons for me has been learning how to play. And that sounds so silly, but it's, I don't know, sometime around middle school or high school, everything became about my resume. And I like had to relearn in my 30s what it is to do something without being attached only to the results, which is the one I just said, right? So it's we have to also do things sometimes just because it's fun, and having fun makes us more creative, it makes us better, and it makes us want to keep doing the things. If we take the fun out of it, who wants to do it? Like this is our one and precious life. And so I think making sure that it's joyful, and that's like I said, that's why I always end on the podcast episodes on that as well. So yeah.
I love that. My making me happy recently is my family, my kids.
Good.
We have a routine we'll do today is we go to the library and get books and sit on the couch and make popcorn and get under a blanket and read together. And it is the simplest, most
Oh, I love that.
tender time. I mean, I
Yeah.
truly look forward to it. We all look forward to it, and that is truly like a quality life for me. And that
Oh,
it's so fun because it's just quality time together, doing
yeah.
something we like. So that makes me happy.
That's a really good one. Okay, something that's making me happy right now is I'm gonna go with a play one too, because that feels like on theme. So I have been getting into, it's very trendy on social media right now, but I have been getting into coloring with alcohol markers. So you can do a lot of like cool blending and sort of patterns and textures because of the nature of alcohol markers. I had bought my first set of alcohol markers literally like years ago, and I never really figured out how to use them. I knew it was something I would like, but I just never really got it. And now that it's super trendy, there's all these like quick and easy kind of tutorials on social media and YouTube and all this stuff. So yeah, I'm like, I kind of amaze myself when I look back at it. I'm like, I just did that. I just colored that. So it's been a really good stress
That
reliever.
is super fun. I
Yeah.
love that. I'll
And
have
I
to try that
love
this time.
coloring is something that I enjoy doing while I listen to podcasts or audiobooks, like nonfiction audiobooks or fiction, frankly. Go ahead, knock your socks off. I like reading physical fiction books, and I like listening to nonfiction audiobooks. But if I'm listening to it, I need to be doing something. And I can't do something that requires like I can't do it in work because then I'm gonna miss what I'm listening to.
Yeah.
So I can do it while I drive, while I do dishes, but I don't like doing either of those things. So coloring is a thing that I can keep my sort of body busy while also listening. So it's then I feel also the part of me that like only wants to do stuff related to my resume. I also feel like, see, it's not a waste of time. I just listened to a whole audiobook. So yeah,
Yeah.
but it's really it's a good, easy, fun thing to do.
I think fun should be a category in your resume. I think it's a skill as an adult to know how to fun. I really do. To play.
Gosh, and who wants to hire somebody who doesn't know how to have fun? Which
Doesn't
I
know how to
say that
play.
knowing that
Yeah.
was me. Like laughing, I've always been a laugher, but I really didn't know how to play. And I feel like it's just like being present in the moment. Like I
Yeah.
didn't know how to be present in the moment. It was just
It's such a good point.
always
Hmm.
working toward the future or beating myself up for not being productive enough, right? So
Category of unfun.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know? My background before we end as an actor, I doing improv was the soul of theater, right? Because to be able to be responsive in the moment and do silly, fun scenes that came out of nowhere, it's pure magic.
Yeah.
So fun, and it involves connecting with other people in the co-creative space and energy. I've remember hearing that Seth Meyers plays improv games with his kids, and I have
Mm.
that as a parenting goal when they're old enough. I'm like, we are
I
having
love that.
Friday
I
night
want to
improv
do
at
that.
my house.
Yes, I want to do that. We have a Monday night
100%.
dinner with my
Yeah.
kids that my youngest is 20. And we have a Monday night dinner where everybody comes over and I can't believe they still want to hang out with us every week, but they do. So yeah, I feel like we're gonna try this. I love that. I've been thinking about joining like an improv group locally.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that. I think it would be good for me where I'm
There's
at.
one I've been going to in the Camelback area, the Biltmore area. They meet weekly. I have fallen off the wagon this year, but super fun. And you get on stage and like at a showcase. So you're actually getting up there and performing your improv too.
How
So yeah,
fun.
super
Yeah,
fun.
I think it would be really good for me. I think it really does all tie together like improv and sales and having hard conversations and that really it's wild sometimes when I think about the different parts of me that feel like they're totally like these separate buckets, but actually at the end of the day, like they really overlap quite a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. The resume is diverse, but it includes multitudes.
Yeah. Well, thank
Mhm.
you for this as always. It's so fun to talk to you. And I just feel like these conversations are so good. So I'm excited. And of course, you're going to have to come back again. We were just talking about this, but season 3, I want to try to switch it up a little bit and I want to do some group discussions. But I would love, imagine this, but with 4 or 5 of us. That would
Yeah,
be so fun.
it will be. Yes,
Yeah.
let's do it.
So, okay. So you'll have to come back. Thank you to you listening. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope to see you next week.